Now we are.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, guys. Well, I apologize for the view there. It seems to be stuck that way at the moment. But so I just want to say welcome back after lunch. Hope everybody had a good lunch. And welcome to Accelerating Educational Outcomes in Rural Places with Dreama Gentry. We're so excited to have her here to talk to you today. I've had a chance to visit with Dreama a little bit and get to know her and her work over the course of the pandemic. And I'm just so happy that she made the time to be here and talk with our Iowa LCANs about her work in rural communities. You know, it's a topic that's really important to us all as we work towards equity and inclusion. We want to make sure that we're addressing our rural communities. So as Executive Director of Partners for Education, Dreama leads Berea College's educational outreach into Appalachian Kentucky. Partners for Education supports the educational aspirations of 50,000 students across Eastern Kentucky using an annual budget of $40 million. An Annie E. Casey Children and Family Fellow, Gentry also serves on the board of directors for the FAHI, a community development nonprofit, and the Pine Mountain Settlement School. She is a member of the Equity Coalition convened by the Pritchard Committee for Academic Excellence, which seeks to ensure Kentucky's school accountability system provides educational excellence to all students. Recently, she organized the annual Rural College Access and Success Summit, which I would encourage you all to check out and register for if you have a chance. This event brings together approximately 400 participants from across the country to improve the educational opportunities available to students from rural communities. Gentry holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Berea College and a Juris Doctor from the University of Kentucky. So please remember, we will have some time for Q&A. Go ahead and enter your comments or questions into the chat or the Q&A, and I will see that Dreama gets those. And at this time, I would ask Dreama to go ahead and start sharing your screen, and I will hand it over to you.
All right, Ann, I think my screen is still showing that you're sharing, so I think you have to stop before I can share.
I think that you should be able to go ahead.
Oh, okay.
But I will turn mine off.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, so thank you. Let me share my screen. You know, the technology, we will get this one day, and hopefully by the time we get it, the world will be back to where we don't need to get it as much. So thanks for having me. And it was so cool to have music. And I was so excited when they said, what's your walk-up song? Because I love music and it's one of the escapes of my escapes. And I really miss live music. And so listening to the songs and figuring it out was great. So the song I chose is The Mountain by Dierks Bentley. And it's a song that reminds me of why I do the work I do. And when I was thinking about all of you doing the work that you do, the college access and success work, it resonated. Because in the work and the work that you're doing, it's hard work. We have to do it every day. And we're doing it so that young people can achieve and they can be successful. But we also know that there are so many forces that are pushing against us as we do this work. And I think that the COVID pandemic, the fight for racial justice that we're seeing in this country shows all the things that we're against as we're working each day to ensure kids succeed. So it's always, that song's always my reminder to keep going, we have to stop, we can't stop, right? And so that's why I wanted to share that song with you. So I do my work in Appalachian Kentucky. And folks that have heard about Appalachia and the region, they've heard about how hard it is. You know, journalists have said that we're, statistically speaking, the hardest place to live in the nation. The community is facing generational poverty. We're a persistently low achieving place. And a lot of that's because of the extraction coal economy. And about 10 years ago, the coal industry started collapsing. The economy that was built around the coal industry started collapsing. So we saw jobs leaving the region. We saw poverty increasing. We saw families that had been middle class dropping into poverty. And now we're seeing the COVID-19 pandemic on top of that. So it is a place that, it's a hard place to live. It's also the substance abuse, the opioid epidemic that came in after the coal collapse. So when outsiders tell you about our place, and when folks talk about the place, they talk about how hard it is to live there. But I think when I think of the place, I think of the people, and I'm from Appalachia. The people who work with me at Partners for Education, we're from Appalachia. And what we see is the promise. We see the mountains that are our home. We see the place that we come from. We also see the young people that are in the region now. They're the smartest, brightest folks. And I'm sure your folks in Ohio, your young people or Iowa are the same way, right? They have promise. It's been really enlightening over these last few months to see young people in our region, and our region is predominantly white. We have like 1% African-American in our population in Appalachian Kentucky. But to see young people, primarily white young people, start demonstrating and marching because they know Black Lives Matter and saying we need a more just place, and seeing young people step out and lead. And it reminds me that we do this because young people can have this, they're the solutions. They're what we want to see in the future. And so when I think of Appalachia, I think of the place and the people and the strength and the power. And I do this work because of all those young people in Appalachia. I was one of those kids. I was the first in my family to go to college. No one was really expecting me to go to college, but I knew I wanted that opportunity, and college was life-changing for me. When I became a parent 21 years ago, the college access work became even more important. So these are my two boys. This is Christopher, he's 16 this year, and Malcolm is 21. And actually Malcolm is entering his senior year at Grinnell. He's a senior at Grinnell, studying from my house. But, so over the last 3 years, as Malcolm has been in Iowa, we've gotten to visit and know the place more. And I see the similarities there with what we're doing here in Kentucky. But having children really clarified for me that this college access and success work is important, because I want every parent, every family to have the same opportunities that my children have. And to me, that is a college degree, because a college degree provides choices and opportunities. And so I take that into my work. And I think about the work we do at Partners for Education. I've been here 25 years, and we've built this place-based model that is cradle to career. And what we want to see is young people thriving at each milestone. We want young people entering kindergarten ready to learn, being proficient in grade level, graduating high school, college ready, getting that college degree, and gaining meaningful employment. And for that is success. And we realize for that to happen, they also have to be safe, healthy, and supported. So we have to be creating communities and systems that support the success of all young people. And for Partners for Education, we do define success as a 2 or 4 year degree. And data will tell you that this is the surest path to leading a healthy life, a fulfilled life, economic mobility. All of those indicators and data points are greater and better if someone has a 2 or 4 year degree. And it is important, when we think about my place in rural Appalachia, the way the economy is now and the ecosystem of Appalachia now, many of the young people who get that 2 or 4 year degree may have to leave Appalachia in order to use that degree. Right? And so there is that tension, right? There are, I've got friends really working in the economic development arena that are really wanting a thriving Appalachia, and they're thinking, okay, a 2 or 4 year degree isn't necessary for a thriving Appalachia, and it may not be for the Appalachia to thrive. I doubt that, but it may not. I'll give them that. But the thing that I do know is young people should have the opportunity to get a 2 or 4 year degree. And those leaders who are saying that a college degree isn't necessary, when I talk to them about their children, their grandchildren, their nieces and nephews, without fail, all of those kids are on that pathway to a college degree. So really, we have to want for all kids what we want for our own children. So we decided as an organization committed to this work that success for us is a 2 or 4 year degree. And so Partners for Education, we do our work, the college access and success work in Appalachian Kentucky. We also, in our last strategic planning, decided that we also need to create and be part of a national movement that supports rural student success, cradle to career. One of the things that I've realized through learning together with folks at Strive Together and the Harlem Children's Zone and these national leaders in this cradle to career movement is that programs alone will not lead to all kids being successful and to college access and success for all students. We have to do capacity building. We have to think about systems change. I also know that Appalachia alone is not going to create the movement for policy change and systems change, but that if we in Appalachia can work with our friends in the Delta, can work with you all in your region to start building a movement for rural students and rural communities, that will impact Appalachia positively. And so our work is really grown from the direct program work and capacity building work in Appalachia to thinking about rural poverty as a whole. And one of the things we've realized is that rural poverty is diverse. It looks different in every place. And because of that, there's not that single image of poverty that makes it easy to address or describe or discuss. There's often these even discussions around what is rural, right? So as we started our first Rural College Access and Success Summit, the question came, well, how are you defining rural? And what we decided is we're not defining it. We're letting the people define it. And if they believe their area is rural and that they have things to learn and things to give in a room with rural practitioners, then they should be in the room. And so we have our folks and friends in Alaska who really think that they are the definition of rural, and then they're in a room with a town of 20,000. They're like, that's not rural, but that town of 20,000 happens to be an hour away from a huge city and have a lot of the same issues that rural communities in Alaska have. So our focus is on rural communities. If you're rural, if you define yourself as rural, we'd love to have you engage with us, and we want to partner with you. The statistics tell us that counties of persistent poverty in this nation, majority are rural, 86%. And persistent poverty is a 20-year indicator of poverty. It's that deep poverty. We see 20% of young adults in rural places having a bachelor's degree compared to 36% of urban young adults. We also see that philanthropy has forgotten about rural America. And that's one of the things we want to change. How do we get private investment in rural places? So as we think about how we do our work at Partners for Education, whether it's Appalachia or whether it's us building and working with other rural communities, we've identified 3 barriers to success. The first is there's a programming gap. Rural places simply don't have enough high quality programs, college access and success programs, academic interventionist programs to meet their diverse needs of young people cradle to career. In our 54 county region, which is really large, we have 1 Boys and Girls Club, right? So there's no after school programs, right? You have the schools, you don't have all of those wraparound services. So there is a programming gap that has to be filled. There's also capacity constraints. Schools and communities do not have the tools, the techniques, the supports to actually tackle the challenges students face. And some of these are real practical capacity constraints. If we think about federal grants and what it takes to write a federal grant and submit it, many schools and rural communities don't have the infrastructure and the support and the time to do those kind of things. So they're at a disadvantage because of that lack of capacity. There's also systems misalignment. Philanthropy is not funding rural places. Many policies and procedures and even federal discretionary grants are written and defined by urban language, and then the reviewers on those federal grants are from urban places. So again, there's this idea of rural is not in the picture and not present. So our model is really, we do all 3 things, right? In Appalachia, we're implementing programs, building capacity, and aligning systems. And in an urban model in a city, you would have maybe 10 or 12 organizations that are implementing programs. You would have as many organizations building capacity, and then you would have these backbone organizations whose job was alignment. But if you all work in rural places, you'll know that we don't have the luxury to just do one of these things, that we have to do all three. And often it is the same entity that has capacity to do programs that actually is building capacity and aligning systems. When we think about the program piece, our Partners for Education work is almost all funded through federal discretionary grants. We're running 4 Gear Up programs. We have 2 Promise Neighborhoods. We have the TRIO programs. We have multiple smaller federal programs that we've braided in there. They're all aligned around our 5 results that you saw on that chart of Cradle to Career, right? So everything ties in, and we've figured out a way to use these federal grants to do a Cradle to Career approach in Appalachia. With our building capacity, we're part of the Anna E. Casey Foundation's Results Count movement, which is this idea that if you put results in the center and develop competencies in leaders to really move results at the population level, at the whole community level, then you can create change. And so the competencies that we work to create in teachers, superintendents, parents, community members, and even students is adaptive leadership skills, seeing themselves as an instrument of change. They're change agents. They're collaborative, data-driven, and equity-focused. And so our training with partners, with schools, with parents really revolves around building these competencies in our residents and in our partners. And we do that through professional development, coaching, and those things. There is another piece of capacity building that's not reflected on this slide, and that is the content base. We also realize that in the academic setting, often teachers don't have the training to do advanced placement or rigorous courses. So there's also a level of content training that goes into our capacity building work. When we think about aligning systems, and I know you all are as part of the Iowa CAN, and we're a member of NCAN also, you're probably familiar with this approach. It really is that collective impact approach of how do we put the student outcome in the center, and how do we focus all the partners around that student outcome. And so we're doing that in rural communities at the county level. We're also doing it at the regional level. We're also working to do this at the national level with the rural student outcomes in the center. And we see this working. We recently did a project in one of our counties that was led by the Chamber of Commerce, and it focused on chronic absenteeism. And the Chamber was really interested in that because first, absent in Kentucky, attendance ties into school funding. But also the Chamber was saying if students are attending school regularly, their belief was those students would also come to work regularly and see that value. And so working together in this one county, they moved attendance right at 10 points over the course of 2 school years, which was a huge success for that community. So this is the model. What we found is it does work. And one of the reasons it works is we're able to bring in enough programs and interventions to reach that saturation level of young people. So this is the core 8 counties. That's the center part of our work. And in these 8 counties, we're actually providing services and interventions to over 50% of all kids. And at the elementary level and the high school level, 68% of young people are being served by one of the Partners for Education programs. And I think it's important that as you do work in place in rural areas, you think about how many students do you have to actually be serving to move that overall population level data point, because that's what we want to do. We want to improve the whole community and the whole system. So that saturation of services is really important. And because we're doing that, we see whole grade level indicators increase. So 3rd grade reading and 3rd grade math are 2 things that we've been focused on since 2013. And so this is that 8 county region, and it shows that by providing the services to enough students, and especially targeting it to the students who most need it, we're actually able to move reading and math at the whole 3rd grade population level in that footprint. We also see that it impacts and transforms schools. So Leslie County is in that 8 county footprint of the intensive services. And over that same time period, beginning probably, this one actually was probably beginning around 2011 to this past year, we've seen 8th grade reading proficiency increase, high school graduation rate, And the high school, where most of our focus was, we've seen their ranking. 224 was right at the bottom of the state of Kentucky, and now they're at 16th. And so this long-term commitment to a place and that long-term partnership does have impact. And, you know, and one of our principals in Leslie County, he retired this year, so we're missing him now. But one of the things he said is that, you know, it was that support that led to those scores, the ACT scores, the AP scores, those kind of things being the highest that had been in the school's history. And it transformed the district and the school. But I think what it really did is it built that confidence and capacity of those school leaders and those students to know they could achieve and they could be high achieving. And I think that's a really important piece. And so I think that, you know, we were really there, the beginning part of that partnership, but that local community took on the work and changed sort of their idea to a college going culture. And I think that's why we saw the big transformation. But it was sort of the work in Leslie County, some of the seeing the impact of the work led us to think about working nationally and how do we really catalyze a rural movement and be part of a rural movement to ensure that zip code really doesn't impact, predict your outcomes, right? That you can be in rural America and a young person and you can be successful. So our rural movement, our work here is 3 pieces, and we rolled this out about 2 years ago. The first thing is we have a team providing technical assistance to rural places that want to do that cradle to career place-based approach. The second is we're working with national organizations that have never worked in rural to help them use a rural lens to determine can they go in and serve rural places. We found after the 2016 election, a lot of organizations were wanting to come into rural America and tell us how to make our schools better and our communities better. And so we decided we needed to work with those organizations to say, first of all, the people there locally probably know the answers anyway. Is there a way you can go in and talk to them and sort of change your model to fit that local context? And the third piece is networking rural practitioners to really collaborate, to share the successes, but also to create systems change for rural communities. And Ann mentioned our Rural College Access and Success Summit. We've done the summit twice. We were supposed to do it in April and it was canceled because of COVID. But we have been really pleased with the number of practitioners, college access and success folks that have been interested in engaging. And we're doing a summit next April virtually, so we hope you all can participate in that. And I think it's important that as you all do your work there, that we work together, we align what we're doing. So I think the call to action is to really stay up to date on policies and practices that can create opportunities for rural students, rural schools, and communities. One of the things that has been transformational for us is using Americorps members at the local level, rural residents as Americorps members in those high-performing or low-performing schools. And there's actually the CORE Act is before Congress now that would actually double the living stipend for Americorps members. So that's one piece of legislation that we're following. There's also another piece of legislation that would do demonstration projects for rural schools and communities that would allow almost like a promised neighborhood approach or a gear up approach in rural places. So I would encourage you to stay up to date on those type of policies and practices that could really benefit all rural schools and students. The other is to network and to share your best practices and to align efforts and partner. What we found when we really looked at ourselves harshly in 2016 is that we had our head down and was doing our work in Appalachia. And we were so focused on that, we weren't aware of some of these national trends that could have accelerated our work, and we weren't learning from other rural places. So we've really tried to, over the last 4 years, start thinking about how do we network and work with people across the country. And I think the third piece is to be that voice and advocate for rural students, rural schools, and rural communities in all conversations. I think it's a population that gets forgotten, and the data is distressing when you see how rural students are graduating from college at much lower rates than urban students. So we have to continually be that voice and bring that data up and make sure that people, funders, investors, and policymakers are thinking about rural places. And I'm happy to connect. Here's my email, and we'll be sharing this slide deck. And then we also have a Rural Summit email address if you want to be engaged either in the summit. We also do free monthly webinars with rural leaders around the country. All right, Ann, I think I got through it all in 30 minutes. So
You did. That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Dreama. And we did have one comment from Donna Lowen in Dubuque. She's our coordinator there, just on the tremendous results that you've seen. I think it was slide 18 that was demonstrating some of the tremendous outcomes that you've seen already. But at this time, I'd like to open it up for questions or comments for Dreama, and I will filter those to her through the chat or the Q&A. Or if we're feeling brave, we can unmute. I think we're a small enough group that, you know, if anyone wants to just dialogue directly, we can just unmute and have a conversation too with the remainder of our time here.
yeah, that either way works for me, Ann, whatever works for you. And I think somebody's asking about the summit. The summit in 2021, it is in April, and I don't remember the date, but it's toward the end of April. It's going to be a Monday through Friday, and it'll be from 1 o'clock to 3:30 each day, Eastern time. What we're doing to get and to create opportunity for more people to attend, it would be an organization can register to attend, but then you can send as many folks as you want. So it would be, we really want to have more voices in the room and more people learning together. So we're hoping that we'll have community members, even parents, and even young people who normally wouldn't be able to travel to Kentucky or wherever for a national conference, join in. And through that time, each day we'll have a keynote and then breakout sessions. And the breakout sessions are for practitioners, college access and success folks that are in the schools. We have some breakouts that are for your principals, your instructional supervisors, and your folks that are the school district people. And then there's others that we have that really are looking at Americorps. We're doing a track for Americorps members this year because we think they really don't get a lot of professional development. And we're also rolling out a project with rural librarians that will give librarians an opportunity to learn together on how they can actually also accelerate outcomes, college access and success outcomes in rural places. But I'll share that with you, Ann, once we get to save the date, so folks will have the date. And I will share this PowerPoint too with you all.
Wonderful. Yeah, and we will definitely share the information about the summit in April. It'll be great to, just the idea of being in person to talk about all of this is great. So the summit, I think at this time we're hoping for, It
is virtual. It'll be virtual next April. And then hopefully by 2022, we'll be back. We were supposed to be in Phoenix, Arizona this year. So 2022, we've re-upped with that hotel. So we plan on being in Phoenix in 2022, but it's virtual in 2021.
Can you talk a little bit about the monthly calls that you've been hosting too? I sort of consider those an extension of the summit myself.
Yeah, and it's interesting. When we canceled the summit because of COVID, we decided that we would do a monthly call, and we're calling it Conversations for Action, because we think we often talk a lot, but sometimes we forget to do the action steps when we learn together. And so each month we've been doing sort of a rural summit conversation for action, where we've been talking either about research or a pressing problem or best practices that impact rural college access and success. And it's been great. We had Dr. Balfons from Johns Hopkins on talking about early warning systems. Our last one was a couple of folks that are using Americorps members to do work in rural Missouri. It's just been really interesting to dig into topics. And if folks have topics they'd like to see us dig into, we'd be happy to do that. And then we also package that up into a podcast that's out there too.
I'm curious for our participants out there that are in more rural communities, if you want to just throw up in the chat box, what do you see as the number one issue or barrier in your community? I think the first one that comes to mind for me in light of the pandemic is broadband access.
Yeah, and we've seen that in our region. There are some places that because of the terrain and that there's just not the wireless or broadband available. And so we still have some folks that are sending packets out to families. And so they're getting packets and those students are getting no interaction with young people. I think the other thing we see, and this was worse before the summer break, was that teachers really didn't understand how to teach virtually. And so young people were online, but teachers weren't understanding how to do that. But I think I did see a lot of growth over the summer. It seems like schools have done a lot of professional development with teachers, and it seems like the classes are going smoother. But we estimate that we have 20% of our students that we haven't heard from since March, right? And that, and when I say we, I mean the schools haven't, right? Because we're working hand in hand with the schools. So there's a 20% of students that have just sort of dissipated since March. We're not totally open back up yet. So we're hoping as we open back up that they'll come back. But I really worry about the learning loss.
Yeah. So we have a comment here from Allie in Ottumwa. Technology for sure is an issue in rural Iowa, but also funding and people. Even when we have Americorps or other positions available, they're hard to fill or hard to fill with the right people.
And so Allie, I agree with you. I think Americorps is a bear to run, but it's also extremely difficult to come up with those match dollars that are required to do an Americorps program. That's why we have to figure out how to get more investment in rural places from philanthropy and public dollars. What we determined, we spent a couple years designing our Americorps program before we rolled it out. We rolled it out about 10 years ago now. And what we determined is we would use residents as our Americorps members. And we would require 2 years of college. So you had to have 2 years of coursework, right? And we found we had a lot of residents that had went to college and got 2 years of credits but hadn't finished. And so our core, we used a model built after City Years model. We put 20 members in one low performing high school so that every student in the high school has a mentor, college connector, and family guide. And it's been transformative. That's what we did in Leslie County that led to that transformation. But I think it's also been transformative in that it's gotten residents that were really struggling and out of the work system, the economic system, back in a service position where they were able to get those student loans that were in default paid off. They were able to then finish their degree. And we're seeing that pipeline of talent that's come through those residents, the schools are now hiring them as teachers, as aides, guidance counselors. If you look across our core group of schools, you'll see former Americorps members now working in multiple places within the schools and even within Partners for Education. But we really stepped into Americorps wanting it to be a way to get the family members of our young people a service opportunity that would hopefully provide them educational opportunities that would break their cycle of poverty. And it's been really successful, and we're wanting to actually expand it because we think it may be part of the solution to the teacher shortage we're seeing in our rural communities.
One other question is, what does state support for education or post-secondary education initiatives look like in Kentucky? In Iowa, for example, we're investing a lot in workforce-related initiatives. So our governor has a goal of 70% of Iowans, having education beyond high school by 2025, but this big push for middle skill jobs, because that's where we anticipate the holes are going to be in our workforce. I'm wondering if you have anything parallel to that in Kentucky.
So I think we're 1 year into with a new governor. The previous governor actually was doing something very similar to that. Funding was being removed from the post-secondary piece into the workforce piece, and that sort of change was happening. With the new governor and with their Council on Post-Secondary Education, I think they've actually found a happy middle ground there. They realize that you must do the workforce piece, but you also have to be creating opportunities that can scaffold up into better paying positions or advancement. Otherwise, you'll end up with folks being topped out, and many of those jobs will be jobs that can't keep a family out of poverty, right? And so the other thing that we're facing in Kentucky is a budget crisis with the state, right? So really there's not a lot of investment coming in at all for any of it. But I do think that with our current governor and with the leaders, they are looking at sort of that balancing the workforce with that long-term gain that more post-secondary graduates can give you, right? To me, it's like, I really don't want their job. I think it's gotta be a horrible job to try to think about short-term and long-term when you have a budget deficit.
I like that phrase, scaffolding up.
Yeah, because yeah, and again, it goes back to that we don't want young people in jobs where they have no advancement, right? But it also means that we as college access folks have to work hand in hand with economic development to be figuring out what is the innovative things you can do in rural places to really drive the economy and create better paying jobs in rural places.
We have we had a hand up from Jackie Hunter. So Jackie, you are unmuted if you'd like to go ahead and share your
Thank you. Thank you, Dreama. I really have enjoyed your presentation. My question is, and this might be an overall question for that anyone could probably answer, but I find that there is pushback. Now, I did this work in Florida. I was a founder of a college access program in 2005, and I did that work until 2016 when I relocated to the Midwest and have since began the process to start the college access programming here. But what I found both in Florida, and I'm still trying to figure it out, but it seems like that nuance is here in Iowa as well, or at least in Dubuque, that there's pushback from schools when there are people outside of the schools who are trying to help support student in the application process and financial aid and all the work that is done in college access. And I'm not really sure how to navigate that. Again, I didn't figure it out before. Eventually I was able to build those relationships, but it never came at the support of the schools advocating for that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And in our rural communities, the school is the critical partner. We first have to have them sort of side by side with us doing this work. What we found is that there was some resentment, I think, from guidance counselors, because like my Gear Up staff that are in schools were getting to do the job that guidance counselors really wanted to go to college and do. But in Kentucky, guidance counselors have really been appropriated to do special education and testing paperwork and a lot of those things that really is not what guidance counselors really wanted to do. And so when we placed academic counselors in the schools, and we call them college and career navigators, they were doing the college visits and the deep planning with young people and the brainstorming about future and some of that things that guidance counselors really wanted to do. And so we were just real upfront with the schools and said, you know, we've got to also reclaim our guidance counselors, right? How do we take some of the workload off of guidance counselors so they can do some of that? But then we also were working with the guidance counselors and saying the reality is you don't have the time, but can you mentor this person? And so in many of our schools, the guidance counselor became the mentor and even the in-school supervisor of the Gear Up College and Career Navigator. So they were able to share in their success. But it was the winning the trust of the school and navigating that relationship is the first step, I think, to success. And it was, in a way, a little bit easier for us because Berea College is a unique college in that we don't charge our students tuition. You have to be low income to come to Berea College. And we always turn away more students than we accept. So the schools knew that we weren't there for like a reason other than helping the students be successful. I think often we have entities wanting to partner with the school, but they're really thinking of their own tuition outcomes, right? They're thinking about a pipeline in. And so I think, Jackie, the key to me was those personal relationships with the school leaders and the guidance counselors and winning them over.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for Dreama? Or just to pose to the group here? If not, we can go ahead and close. And I just want to thank Dreama again.
Yes, 47.
We will be sure to share the upcoming information about the summit and then also the monthly conversations for action with everyone. So just thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me and thanks for taking the time to think about your rural places. And if we can be of assistance, just reach out.
We definitely will. You have a good afternoon. We'll talk to you soon.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.